decisions, coaching decisions. Let's start with Baylor. Baylor announced that Dave Aranda will be back for one more year. He has, of course, years left on his contract. There was about a 50-50 split, depending on who you talk to. Would he be back? Would they look for somebody else? Craig and Paul, Dave Aranda back with a little bit of a change here and there for 2024.
I'm not surprised. You know, we were doing the post-game show the other night, and people were calling up saying, hey, give us a list of replacement candidates. And I said, look, I'll throw out some names that fit, but, like, I'm not comfortable getting into it because I honestly don't think that it's going to change and we don't know. And, you know, that's not what the people wanted to hear. They wanted Dave Aranda gone. That's what the fans wanted at Baylor. That's not what happened. Jeff Grimes is gone. He's not going to be the offensive coordinator. That means probably Eric Mateos is going with him. We'll see about that. Dave Aranda is going to be much more involved in the defense, essentially calling it this year. So there's going to be there's some changes that are going to go on, and we'll see who the offensive coordinator is going to be. But Dave Aranda stays, and it's because Mack Brown believes he's the guy to get the program back on track, and we'll see how that works out over the next year.
Mack Rhodes believes, not Mack Brown.
Yeah, Mack Rhodes.
Yeah, Mack Brown. That'd be a good, nod from another head coach, a little backing there. But, first, let me ask you guys, do you think if that game would have gone the way that it looked like it was going to go in the first half and it ended that way rather than them having this chance to win at the end, like let's say they got beat by 28 points like they were well on their way to, do you think the decision was the same?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we all felt like going into this weekend that he was going to be around no matter what, really. And it did look like that game against West Virginia was going to get really ugly early on in the first half. But, Richard Reese obviously made that a game all on his own shoulders. And, the rest is history with another heartbreaking way to lose. So here we are, and now we at least have some clarity. I mean, that's how I took the news more than anything else, is just, hey, it's good to know kind of what we're going to be talking about and who we're going to be talking about for the most part, and that is year 5 for Dave Aranda. I know the fan base is very split on this, if not tilted in the negative as far as feeling about, or how they're feeling about, another year with Aranda at the helm. But you got the shakeup at coordinators. I mean, the defense is entirely on his shoulders now. He's going to be the guy calling plays and running the defense. That's smart. I think that's what you have to do. The change on offense with coordinators, Jeff Grimes being on his way out. I think, for all the Jeff Grimes fans that there might be, or even if you're like myself, you thought he did a good job, they needed a shakeup on that side of the football. I think that was pretty apparent that they weren't even equipped to run the type of offense that he really wanted to, and it was feeling stale, and they needed to press the reset button there. So, quite frankly, that's all Aranda could really do. They could, in theory, change their quarterback or change certain personnel, but they're shaking it up with coordinators. We'll see if that's enough, but he's run out of any other reasons for why this thing isn't working. NILs is also going to be a bigger factor. So, it's all on him this upcoming year, and I know it's going to be a long year, a long off season and plenty of other changes to take note of, but I'm not surprised by the moves themselves either, and I think they could be beneficial, but I just don't know how much of a turnaround you expect from this year to next year and what will need to be done to save his job for year 5, you know?
I don't know how much, enhancing NIL, that's a long-term move.
Right.
In the long term, it's a good idea, and it might help you a little bit in the short term, but the fact is that they probably need 3 or 4 offensive linemen to make sure that Blake Shapen, to me, if I'm Blake Shapen, I want them, if I commit to staying, I want to do that knowing that I'm not going to get absolutely wood chippered every game next season. And plus, I'm running out of eligibility. I don't even know if this is going to be good. If I can go somewhere and possibly win, I might do that anyway, because I think for a guy like Blake Shapen, NIL is going to be the same whether he stays at Baylor or goes to Duke or something.
Yeah, I think Blake Shapen needs to look at his options, whatever those may be. I also think the new OC rolling in might want another option than Blake Shapen or Sawyer Robertson or whoever else you might be looking at on that roster like RJ Martinez. So, yeah, there's a lot of questions. I mean, just the one thing we know is Aranda's back. That's the big piece of the puzzle that we weren't sure about. We know that Aranda's coming back. There were a lot of eye rolls, a lot of anger with that news breaking yesterday, because a lot of people had set themselves up for the idea that he was going to be fired. But, like we all said last week, we all felt like pretty much no matter what, he was going to stick around. So that's the way it turned out. Hate it for Jeff Grimes. hate it for Matt Powledge that it's a little bit of a demotion, even though he'll maintain that DC tag, but they had to do something, obviously, after the way this season went. And without firing your head coach, I mean, this is about what you can do, changing both coordinators, putting the defense on your own shoulders, and then going out there and trying to play in the portal. But as we know, everybody else is playing in those waters too. So, hopefully you get a good amount of bang for your buck, but you can't afford this class didn't work out, so we need to run it back, or, this guy, we thought it was going to. No, you don't have any of that anymore. You have to win, and you have to start showing massive improvement right now.
Well, and I have brought up the coordinator stuff in front of even Dave Aranda. I've asked him, you're going to be that guy, that Will Smith meme? You're the only one left from the room? Well, I was given some piece of information. Kyle Whittingham at Utah has been, wouldn't you all say, very successful?
Yes.
He has been through 9 offensive coordinators. I don't know how many of those 9 took jobs that are better. Utah's pretty good. They're a top 25 program, but he has been through 9. Now, there's a lot that haven't been through much. As Saban, Kirby Smart, those, Mac Brown when he was at Texas, went through a few, but a lot of times they also were better jobs they moved on to. That has not been the case, although Dave Roberts at Auburn might say otherwise.
Ron Roberts at Auburn.
I've
seen a lot of how many coordinators are you going to hire and fire? As many as it takes? I mean, until he gets the plug pulled, he's going to do whatever he can, and he's going to fire and hire 6 of them if that's what it takes, and that's what he's going to do. But, they started off with Larry Fedora. It was a bad hire. It was during the COVID year, and that did not work out well, and everybody knew it, and they cut bait very quickly. So, hey, there's your mulligan, I guess. But, let's not act like Jeff Grimes was just here for a cup of coffee. He's been here for 3 years, guys, right? He's been here for 3 seasons. So, there was a thought there for a while that he was going to be off to be a head coach, that they were going to have to try and retain him because his stock was going to be so high, especially after the 2021 season. So, he had a good run, but did y'all think the offense was going to get any better next year?
No.
Absolutely not.
No.
You have your best player who's running 2 kickoffs back to even make it a game on Saturday, and you can't find a place for him on your offense.
Speaking of which,
so there's that part of it. So I think that, hey, you got 3 years, you had a successful 2021, but the offense, the personnel doesn't even fit now. So what's the point? You have to make a move there. And on defense, we all know that wasn't working out with Powledge. He's just not quite ready for that spotlight and that role. And so, yeah, you can say all you want to about changing coordinators and this and that, but I think we all know this is the last time that's going to happen, and it needed to happen in both cases.
Richard Reese had 2 90-plus yard kick returns. You combine the totals of that, and I think there was 1 or 2 other kick returns, and he probably had as many yards on Saturday night kick returns as he's had all year long as a returning freshman All-American running back. That just doesn't make sense. Missed some games, perhaps because you're dinged up. It just did not make sense. Good for him. It took it like he took his – okay, I'm not going to get any carries he had. He still led the team in rushing Saturday with like 6 carries. So, and I'm not saying we don't know what's at practice. We don't know what's going on in the film work. But something was always a little bit weird, and I even asked him that in the postgame, and he just said, hey, they brought some other new guys in, and they wanted to give them a chance. Like, for example, Dominic Richardson, obviously Dawson Pendergrass, the true freshman, who's a grinder. But, yeah, you're right. Something had to change. Now, how many men on the roster? 85 to 110 or so? Offensive coordinator, Paul, Baylor's tight end position. Heavy.
Yeah.
Probably 1/8 or 1/9 of their roster is tight ends. How many of them can convert? If they looked at going to more of a wide open offense, how many of them of the 9, Craig and Paul, could probably play wide receiver?
Or that kind of split tight end. Or
they're moving on. They go somewhere else, so they could become an offensive tackle.
But if you do that, though, if you've got, say 7, favorably 7 positions, because, you're going to lose guys anyway. Like, that's just how it is. Like, if you're the 8th tight end, you're probably not coming back. Like, you'll find a place to go play. But
Drake Dabney's probably going pro. I would just assume.
So you're going to have some guys. But so say you've got 6 guys that are all still tight ends. Well, if you convert to an offense that's wide open and runs that the tight end where he's not really ever on the line, then you're going to lose most of those guys, which isn't really a thing because you don't need them, but then that's more people you have to fill. And I would also say in Baylor's commitment, if they want to go to a more of a spread concept offense, the worst position on the offense outside of offensive line in my position is wide receiver. And you're going to need more of those guys who can make plays. That's been the most underachieving one. So then if you lose some tight ends and have to get wide receivers, you got to make sure you do that right, because they haven't really hit on that all that well in the transfer portal at all. So that's going to be something you have to assess better. There's so many layers to this as it goes to moving forward and what this Baylor roster is going to be, especially in the offensive side of the ball, because you don't even know what kind of system they're going to run. And like I mentioned about Blake Shapen, Craig, you had the great counterpoint to that of like, well, what if Blake Shapen's not the guy to run the offense that they hire? Now, I would think that they'll probably, lean maybe towards somebody who likes Blake Shapen, because quarterback and offensive line are the two hardest things to find and work in the transfer portal. But, I just don't know. And so there's all those questions that are going to remain.
Yeah, I think it all depends on what kind of offense you run, but I doubt that it will be an offense that's running with all of the tight ends that you've brought in at this point. And, I don't know enough about them individually to say, well, this guy could be a wide receiver, or this guy could be like Sam Tecklenburg and move over to the offensive line. But, the thing about the tight end room is also just how young they are. Freshman, sophomore. And there's some juniors and seniors sprinkled in there as well, but you've got a handful of guys just in the freshman and sophomore ranks alone, and I don't know how many you need. But obviously with Jeff Grimes' offense, being a tight ends coach, he loved that position and the importance it had in what they did. But, yeah, you would think that that's probably an area that will get to a little bit of a slice off the top and get narrowed down a little bit. But who knows? Let's see who the OC is going to be. I just know that there is going to be change galore in store. I can't imagine that it's just going to be, hey, Blake Shapen's back and the tight ends are all back the same and everything. There's not monumental changes, but they are, because they're the biggest changes you could make besides firing the head coach. And so since you're not doing that, all you can do is replace coordinators and change up your roster and I guess make some position coach changes. But naturally, that'll happen on offense with whoever the OC is. He'll decide who his O-line coach will be, who his tight ends coach will be, and so on and so forth. But, there's a lot of questions still remaining. We do, though, have at least a few answers now that we didn't have before Saturday, and it's a shame. You hate it, but, Grimes had a great year in 2021. They'll always have that. Everybody that was a part of that run, the best year in Baylor football history, but it was just very obvious that, look at that crowd on Saturday night. I know that was Thanksgiving, but that was apathy, and that's been that way pretty much for a good chunk of the year now. Something had to change, and besides Aranda, this was, again, all that you could really do. But I know that folks are very split on the Aranda decision itself. I don't know how much you guys have gathered, if that comes down to money, if that comes down to stubbornness, if that comes down to just still belief that others don't quite have right now. But
can it be all the above?
Yeah, sure.
It can be that the money, if you really wanted to make a change, would have been there. It wouldn't have been easy to get it. It's not like you have, tons and tons like some of the other schools who $25 million or $18 million is no big deal. I'm just throwing out numbers. Could it be that, you know what, we're going to give him everything he needs. He himself understands what he must do better, because when you have a philosophy like Aranda, and the NIL to you is like a cuss word, or the transfer portal is kind of like a cuss word, and you have been fighting against it, and then all of a sudden you lose your traction, you better learn how to deal with it and also make it work.
I think he's a lot more – he's going to be flexible because he has to be, but also where Dave has to adjust is that he put those – like, okay, we talk about Dabo Swinney in the same way. I think we need to talk about Dave a little bit in the same regard, in that he put those governors on NIL and the transfer portal himself. Nobody put them on them. Baylor didn't put them on them. The NCAA didn't put them on them. The Big 12. Like, nobody made a rule that you didn't have to do that. He made the choice.
And I'm not so sure there weren't some, though, at Baylor that also wanted to kind of see how this thing went, too.
Yeah, I get the whole, let's see how it goes. But, when you turn around, especially in your own state, and the two biggest schools in the state, the three biggest schools in the state are
Texas A&M, and UT.
Yeah, are absolutely. And then you're not going to have as much money as them because they just have more alumni, but they're just, it's like one of those little money machines, like you would get in and you try to grab the dollars. That's what it was, that you keep throwing money in it. Well, you maybe have to be more aggressive than you thought you'd be. And I know that like idealistically, everybody should make the same amount of money. Like that whole thing, that's great. But again, socialism's not really a thing that works. And so it didn't work there. So then you had to change it. So those things were on Dave Aranda. He made those choices himself to do that. And now he's paying for it.
And can they identify talent and get the right talent? Can they go do that in the transfer portal and also with recruiting?
Well, that's a big question because if you look at the transfer portal class last year, it was very miss and very few hits. I mean, just in general with their transfers, I think it's been tilted towards the misses far more so than the hits. I mean, Siaki Ika was a hit, but he was trouble in his own right. I mean, and do y'all realize he's not played at all for Cleveland this year? Like, is not even active?
No.
Yeah, like he's totally not. So, like, you just look back on, like, Aranda's vague comments about him and all that kind of stuff. But as far as at Baylor, he had an impact, but not nearly as big of one as he probably should have had. But he did have an impact. And there's others that have had moments here and there. But, yeah, for the most part, it's been average, like return on investment, or nothing really return on investment, but nothing that blows you away and makes you think. Like, that's the whole thing when the transfer portal has been brought up, is that you think about what they've already done and you go, so how's it going to be any different? Like, okay, they'll go get this guy and that guy and they'll have like a few catches and a couple things that go right, but for the most part, they're not game changers, they're not difference makers. And so what makes you think that that'll be the case this time around? I guess because you're going to up your NIL game, but again, you're just now jumping into the pool that everybody else has already been swimming in for a while. So I don't know that guarantees anything, but they have no choice but to go out there and improve this roster somehow, some way. And look, like every other decision that's going to be made from now on, whether it's coaching or whether it's the roster, it all falls back on Aranda and absolutely no one else. And if it doesn't work out, then that is another nail in his coffin and no one else's.
If you do